Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold. I'm Nicholas Sacco, your host for this week's episode 28 of season 5, or episode 141, if you're counting from the beginning. And guess what? We're in another prelim. Can you believe it? We certainly can, because we were definitely predicting this a week ago. But it comes after that 7-point victory over the D's at the MCG last Thursday night. It was heated, intense, and we stood up to all the challenges that came our way. And we now look towards a home preliminary final and a clear path towards the decider in a fortnight. We chat about that qualifying final, the good, the bad, and the very, very good. We also talk more about the victory on AskPiesNation, chat even more about winning as part of our quick AFLW wrap-up, and speak to our next guest, the crowd competition winner. And it is the OG3 in the studio, Luke, Marcus. Welcome, boys. What a great Thursday night it was to see the Pies win another qualifying final, and we are off with another break through a prelim next week.
Yes, Nico, Lukey, great to be back with you after a couple of weeks off, and what a time to be a Collingwood supporter. That game of footy was very shaping in how the finals will pan out, and to have the week off is true luxury. Not sure what's happening this week and who we might play, Lukey, but to be on the winners list this week feels very, very sweet for us in the studio.
Yeah, it was as intense a game of footy as you'll see in a very long time. Not only from what was happening on the field, but off the field with the crowd as well. It was intense being there and a part of it. But loved every moment of it, and just fantastic to get the win. And not only for the week off, I think how important it is that we've got ourselves on the right side of the draw with the home preliminary final, but it also just the week off because of how tough that game was. I think that is incredibly important, and Melbourne are going to struggle to back it up, I think, this week.
Well, it was already billed as a game that was pretty much the most important match of the final series, bar the grand final, particularly with the reasons you said, a home preliminary final, a much easier side of the draw with, of course, Port Adelaide or GWS as our opponent in the preliminary next week. And then as the game went on and it became more intense and more heated, it became apparent it was, geez, we really need to get on top here because there's going to be sore bodies. There's going to be a lot of drama off the field. And, yeah, we just needed that extra week. It allows, the likes of Dacos, of course, to get himself an extra week on the sidelines, prepped and ready to go. And I'm sure there's going to be more drama that comes along with that with selection. But, yeah, just the way we were able to produce that type of performance. The first quarter for me was so telling, particularly when it was at the hottest stage of the game, when, of course, everything happened with Maynard and there was a lot happening. We were able to keep our heads. I think the Demons were more worried about what was happening as a result of that Brayshaw incident. We were able to get on top, get a few early goals and establish a lead that really we never looked like losing, even in those last stages of the match when Melbourne were peppering.
Yeah, it was a crazy game on so many levels between the theatre, obviously Brayshaw going off early. Thoughts go out to Gus Brayshaw and wishing him a speedy recovery. But there was just so much happening at one time that you couldn't kind of settle as a spectator, and obviously got a little bit heated there. I don't know about you boys, but sitting in the MCC, there was definitely
Nice
some
spot, yeah.
raucous Melbourne supporters, to say the least. But all things considered, Nico, that is what you go to the footy for, really. I mean, with how much was going on and all the layers to the game, and there was so much finals to love about that game, and it makes you sort of appreciate how the season does reset once you qualify and you get to these intense periods of games where there's not even a score, but every contest just feels like there's so much on the line, Lukey, and I really feel like we were able to manage the moments for longer throughout that game, despite not being on top in a classical sense.
Yeah, there were definite moments in that second half where Melbourne really got on top, and it felt, geez, we're in a bit of trouble here. But the way our defence was able to steady the ship and just hold on almost for dear life at certain points, but not concede. I know Melbourne missed a few, but I felt like we put them in positions, put the pressure on them to miss those. So, but almost that last quarter was just hanging on for dear life. And we go into that last quarter, we're like, we just need probably one, maybe two goals.
Just one goal, really.
And then it got to 20 minutes through the quarter. It's like, just one goal, just one. And I didn't think we'd actually scored in that last quarter, but I realised we scored it was the two behinds we got. But I thought we actually started and scored 0 for the quarter, but we literally just hung on for dear life and got away with I wouldn't say got away with the win, we deserved the win, but another 3 or 4 minutes, it was getting a bit dangerous.
Certainly was, but yeah, we had our own pretty well in the back 50, and we can look forward to what's to come next week. Let's get into the game in a little bit more detail and start, as we always like to, with the pie that caught your eye. I reckon there are a lot of options to pick from in terms of the players that stood up on Thursday night. So, Marcus, let's get underway.
Yeah, and that's a pleasing aspect of a win like that. There were very few passengers in this team, and the one that I've gone with this week, Nico, is Isaac Quaynor. Talk about moments and standing up in games and really defining who you are as a footy player. Q did that on the weekend. He's shown us time and time again throughout the year why he's such a strong one-on-one player, but to be on Keziah Pickett for large chunks of that match and come up with, I reckon it was 3 huge contested marks late in the game. It was everything at the time, and he spills one of those marks. Who knows what happens? That's how close it was to your point from just before, Luke. So was wrapped with his game. I think it's again right in the coattails of getting that All-Australian squad nod, and he's set for a huge prelim, and he's stepping up as an emerging leader of this football club before our very eyes. So pie that caught your eye.
Yeah, the pie that caught my eye was actually the one that was celebrating one of those intercept marks from Quaynor. It was Will Hoskin-Elliott. I thought and shout out to one of my good friends, Riley. He's been on the Will bandwagon for a little while this year, but this was probably one of his best games for the club. He stood up in a big way. He was kind of just in the right spot at the right time throughout the whole 4 quarters.
And
clean with the footy. At times when we were making a lot of mistakes, both teams were making mistakes. The pressure was high. Will was just composed, clean with the footy and able to make the right decisions and able to get a lot of the footy as well. So I just thought this was one of his best games for the club, and really the reason why he's in this 2022 or 23 is because of what he done on Thursday night. He's the type of player that is actually built for finals, and he showed that on Thursday night. So he was the pie that caught my eye.
And I don't want to toot my own horn, but it's a reason why I wanted to keep him in the squad in our preview pod last week, just about that versatility that he brings to the table, and finishes with 10 rebound 50s, 5 tackles, 5 marks and 20 disposals. 19 of them were kicks. So it just goes to show the importance that he has, not only as a link-up play, but someone that can just be, as you guys have said, so efficient with ball in hand. It was a real standout, particularly in those really tight situations where Melbourne were starting to get on top. He was always a great outlet for us.
And some of those kicks he nailed, he's tight in the back pocket, and he's nailed it to, you couldn't even see the Collingwood player that he's kicked it to. It was just pinpoint precision. So, great game from Will.
Absolutely. There were so many I could have picked, really, for the pie that caught your eye. 2 of those you boys have mentioned in Isaac Quaynor and Hoskin-Elliott. Quaynor particularly superb in that last quarter. And speaking of last quarters, this is where I've gone towards, because there's a man that's been missing from this 23 for the last couple of weeks. Made his return from injury, and he's not just any player, he's our captain, and he stood up when the moments mattered and where we're required to be in that last term, and it's Darcy Moore. 16 disposals at 88% efficiency, 12 of those were kicks, 4 marks, but it's the last quarter in particular where he really did take the game by storm. Melbourne were peppering. Melbourne were doing everything possible to get deep entries inside 50, and just about every single time, if it wasn't Isaac Quaynor, it was Darcy Moore that was able to take care of it. He had 11 intercept possessions for the game. 3 of those came in the last quarter. 8 rebound 50s, 3 of them in the last quarter. 10 1%ers for the match, 5 of those in the last quarter, and of course a contested mark to make it 2 for that match. But it just goes to show, yes, on paper, we know what he can bring to the table, and he kept McDonald pretty well held for most of the night, which isn't really a hard task, let's be honest, but it was what he was able to do around that defensive 50, leading the troops. We were structured incredibly well, and it's because of that leadership. Collingwood stands much taller when he's in that back 50, and it was proven again what he was able to do, and I thought he was absolutely superb, and a key reason why we were able to get the win like we did. So pretty impressed with Darcy once again.
Darcy was huge, and remembering that this was his first match after at least 3 weeks off.
Pretty much.
And same for Nathan Murphy, and I really think that's an important point to acknowledge. Like, they're not match fit, if you will. They've lost a little bit of conditioning through the legs, and so to come back in a final is a massive ask, even though they are obviously guys who've played most of the year. So I thought they held up really well, and it was hot in that last quarter. Like, you were out on your feet just defending for dear life. So huge from Darce, and just hoping, to your point, that whoever he matches up on in the prelim isn't an absolute spearhead gun forward, because I think at times throughout the year where we have looked a bit exposed is when Das has to go to like a Charlie Dixon or a Jeremy Cameron or whatever. Let's just hope he gets a lesser forward so he can
Potentially a Charlie Curnow.
peel off and intercept as well as he can. So great to have the captain back.
Certainly was, made a huge difference. So many players, as I said, I could have picked. We'll start straight from the first term. We mentioned how important it was to get those goals early on the board, and it came thanks to Bobby Hill, who ended up with 3 for tonight. And I think it was not just his goal sense and his ability to set up goals around him as well, but his pressure in the forward half was a particular highlight. He finished with 4 tackles, and that's only the 3rd time this year that he's had 4 tackles or more, and just goes to show it's probably one of the more weaker sides to his game. But we mentioned when we first recruited Bobby how we felt like he was a player that would really rise to the big occasions. You said Anzac Day medalist, didn't quite work out that way, Marcus, but you get rid of that if it means that he performs in a big final like he did on Thursday night, and he was superb. He loved the occasion. He was pumping up the crowd with him, and the confidence just came right from the outset when he kicked that opening goal. Great to see Bobby Hill have a huge impact like he did, and he's going to be very important for us over the next final or two.
Yeah, look, I can't say anything more about the way that he helped us get off to an incredible start, really set the tone and kind of perplexed Melbourne from the get-go. Like, his front and centre work was amazing, and what also really impressed me about Bobby Hill was his front and centre work and ability to put pace on his direct opponent, and then his field kicking even at full tilt is unbelievable. The way he hits guys on the lead. There was actually one passage on the wing, I think in the second half, where he hit Dan McStay with his beautiful ball and he dropped it, or maybe it was in the first half. But look, other than that, it felt like every chain that he was a part of resulted in a score or came very close to it. So he's going to go absolutely deep into our finals campaign.
And it's the reason we recruited him. He adds that bit of danger and excitement to this team that was probably lacking and almost cost us last year. Not that bit of point of difference, and he brings that. And like you said, he loves the big stage. He probably didn't get that at the Giants, so he's come to a big club like Collingwood, playing in probably the biggest crowd he's played in front of.
Now, good point once again, because when you come from the Giants, you probably only ever played in front of, I don't know,
15 people.
I thought you were about to say 15,000, but don't take that for granted. Like, coming over and playing Anzac Day, playing King's birthday, and playing finals, like, that's enormous. Do you
remember round 1 against Geelong? That would have been his biggest game for his career so far, and I remember he played a really, really good game, and it was like, he's built for big crowds and big stages, and that's what we're looking for towards the end of the year. And he showed on Thursday night that he's meant to be out there for us. So, yeah, he's going to play a really important role across the prelim and hopefully grand final.
Yeah, absolutely. My other favourite part of the first quarter was that incredible Jack Crisp goal, running around from on the paint of 50 pretty much. He finished with our best disposal count in terms of a Collingwood point of view, with 23 touches and 500 metres gain. I know he probably wasn't as efficient with the footy as he would have liked at times, finished with 7 turnovers, but 5 clearances, 11 contested possessions and 4 inside 50s were pretty important in terms of getting us through and continuing that run forward. But yeah, that goal in the first term, if Bobby Hill's just didn't pump the crowd out, that certainly did.
Oh, he was enormous, and the way that he kept his feet throughout the game on a wet deck, at least for the first half, I thought, despite Jack always wanting to take the game on and go through the middle, he really, for me, is often the guy who, if we're having a bit of a lull, he's the one who wants to take the risks and look for that corridor kick. And funnily enough, that's where we create scoring opportunities from. So, no, it's not always the most appropriate thing to do throughout a game of footy, but I thought he was our most honest midfielder for the entire match, and if you're going to turn the ball over, you're going to turn the ball over. It's a fast game these days, but I'm sure he'll look to tighten that up. And yeah, for me, he was absolutely magnificent, almost one of our best on the ground.
And speaking of big goals, what about Jordan De Goey's?
Yeah,
that was at a stage in the game where Melbourne were coming, they kicked a couple, and the game sort of came to life a bit in terms of scoring. It was a low scoring affair, but then all of a sudden we're getting back-to-back goals from both sides. And De Goey just kicks an absolute perler from about 45 metres. It just sails straight through the middle, and that got every Collingwood fan out of their seat pumped. It was a third quarter, I think. And sort of the moment where he didn't have a great game, De Goey. We kind of always go into these big games and go, De Goey's going to have a big one. He's built for these. He didn't quite live up to that, but he made that moment his own, and it was a very important goal that he kicked.
Yeah, you mentioned that third quarter, I think it was the most important term of the match, in my opinion, because yes, the first quarter we got a great start, but it was a stage where Melbourne were really coming hard, apart from, of course, the last quarter. But from the 9-minute mark of the third term until three-quarter time, 4 goals won, we kicked, and that 1 point was a rushed. 2 goals, 3 for Melbourne. Yeah, that's a big difference. That's almost, in fact, if it's not the game, right there. So efficient with our ability to hit the scoreboard. That was a crucial part, of course, towards the win. But also just having a response to every challenge that Melbourne brought to the table. Yes, they might have been able to get 1 or 2 in quick succession. We would turn around. McStay was a very big part in that as well. Took a really great, courageous mark running back with the flight and was able to pop that through simply. You mentioned his goal as well. That was just as important. That was the most pleasing part because there have been games this year, especially late in the season, where teams do start to pile on a bit of pressure on the scoreboard and we sort of just let them come back and then play out a really tough last quarter. But no, we actually ended up winning the third term because of our ability to keep mounting any challenge that came came from Melbourne, and as a result, it put us in a really good position to head into that last quarter with the advantage it did, and really it did win us the game because we only lead at three-quarter time by 2 or 3 goals, and Melbourne still have the term they did. It's a different result and a different story. So they say it's a premiership quarter. I think it really emulated that with how we performed.
Yeah, it was just enough breathing room to go into three-quarter time thinking they have got their backs absolutely up against the wall. Like they're really going to have to pull something out of the bag despite BT saying it's only 25 points. Oh, they could come back here. Does my head in.
They'd only scored about 25 to that point as well.
Yeah, not far off it. But you're right, Nico. We stood up and played finals like football deep into that third term, and that's when it counts. So yes, it was low scoring, yes, it was scrappy, but I tell you what, if you've got the 2 best teams on the last day of the year, that's what you expect. So
very wet night, so
that
it was mistakes galore. But yeah, the pressure, it wasn't just the wet of the footy and the ground, it was the pressure of both sides. That was as high a pressure game you'll see this year.
How worried were you about Max Gawn? Because I certainly was, particularly in that second half. He dominated around the ground. I know that Cox may have had his measure at times in the ruck. I think he won the first 8 headouts of the game, Mason Cox. But Gawn, when he started taking those marks down the line, it was a little bit concerning. And himself and Petrarca were probably the 2 keys that were going to try wheel Melbourne over the line. And to be fair, they almost did. They've been terrific players all year, and they were again on Thursday night, but it did make me a little nervous seeing how easily Gawn was able to go around and have an impact, whether it was taking marks or bringing the ball to ground to allow those Melbourne forwards to get ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what the message was at half-time from Fly, but at periods throughout the first half, it felt like we actually got our switch game back and we were looking for Steele on Ed Langdon 1 out often, and he was beating him. Steele was on fire in the first half, but something changed in the second half and we did start to go down the line a bit more than I'd like, and I think that's when Lever, May and Gawn between the arcs really came into the match. When we went back through the corridor once again, like that created the chaos footy and we looked more like Collingwood. But yeah, I don't know, Nico, it's a funny one to comment on because I think that either way the match goes, we'll look back and think Gawn was on top, but Cox still had his moments throughout the match too. And Darcy Cameron, I understand, was a bit short, came into the game a bit ill. So that might explain Gawn's dominance throughout those periods of the match. But I thought Coxie did enough, Lukey.
Yeah, I know. I rated Cox's game. I thought he started, like you said, he won the first 8 hit-outs, but it was I think he put a knee into Gawn in that first ruck contest and kind of set the tone. I know you don't want to injure the opponent, but it was just kind of Cox setting the tone like, no, you're not just going to I'm not just an easy beat tonight. You're going to have to work hard. I thought Cox, put in a really good effort. Gawn is probably the best ruckman in the game, and that was one of his best performances. Someone said it was his best game of his career. I don't know if that's a bit of a stretch. But
grand final.
Prelim, grand
it was final. A really good performance. And Cameron did struggle a bit, but if he was a bit ill, that kind of explains it. And probably explains why we kept with the Cox and Cameron combo, even though it was wet. A lot of people calling for one of them to come out late.
Ended up happening
with the weather. So, I thought Cox held his own really well.
Don't tell Melbourne supporters we were going to injure one of their players. They'll think that he needs to get a go. Yeah, you're right. I think Cox held his own at times, and you're right. Yes, maybe there were stages late in the game that Gawn was looking in control, but as you said, Marcus, I thought he did enough to definitely earn that spot. There were no questions about it staying in that 22. Still side bottom, though. I have to talk about him. And I know Jack's spewing that he's not here because he wants to make up for the comment he made last week about him potentially being out of the side.
Slammed on social media.
Of course, he's 22 disposals, 5 marks, 6 tackles, 10 contested possessions, 5 intercept possessions, 4 clearances, and 6 rebound 50s. Probably the only fall to his game was his 46% disposal efficiency. Other than that, particularly in that first half, like you said, Marcus, he was pretty dominant and was such a key pillar in leading the way towards us having a good start by half time.
So have we dropped Jack, have we?
because of that call.
Being omitted.
Absent today.
Punishment.
Week off.
No, that's it. He's just having a bit of a rest.
No appeal. Look, I know Jacko was probably wishing he had that moment back, but shout out to Dukes.
And I gave Jack the bit of, this is a discussion podcast.
Oh, of course, yeah.
What's the point if we're not going to throw a few things up? Especially with this selection this year, it's been such a tight who's in, who's out. We can't really, there's so much depth there.
You're still getting slammed for saying mistake, wouldn't you?
But you got to create conversation, and no one expected Noble to go out, and then he's the one who goes out. So, good on Jack for sparking some conversation and bringing that to the table. But still played exceptional, and it was one of those games you watch and go, this is why the leaders are so important at this time of year.
Right.
And I thought Pendlebury played a really good game as well. His numbers weren't exceptionally high
Off
or
the
anything,
ball,
but I
though.
just thought the little things that he was doing was why we still have him out there as
invaluable.
the leadership that he brings. So I feel like we're at the peak of having that right amount of leadership at the top, but so much youth coming through that this side is at its peak right now, and that's why we're getting really excited over the next few weeks for what's to come. But I thought Sidey and Pendles were both exceptionally good.
He had 15 touches, Pendles. 7 of them came in the last quarter. So, it just goes to show how important that is.
But also probably sacrificed his game to try and nullify, I don't know who is on patrol. They all rotate so much, I can't keep up these days. But, a defensive type game from Pendles to try and let others in.
What did we think of Noble's omission, just as a side note? I mean, in hindsight, worked out okay because we were able to get the win, but there was always going to be someone we felt that was going to come out of this team. That's how we had that discussion last week. But I feel like either way, I don't think Noble will get back into this team, which is very unfortunate for someone that has been such a terrific player for our team over the last 80 or whatever consecutive games he's been with us. But it turned out to be the right move in the end in terms of what that provided off half-back. Markov, I thought, had some really solid moments, particularly in the first half. And, of course, we mentioned Jack Chris was playing an exceptional role. Isaac Quainer was terrific too. So it was a tough call at the time. I think it might have worked out okay, but unfortunately for Nobes, I don't see him back in his team this year.
I think we'll need to have a look at wins next week because the Giants do have some dangerous small forwards, and I do wonder if, as good as Oleg's pace is, whether he's the best matchup for like a Brent Daniels or like a proper small forward, like a guy that you need to have a Johnny Noble type because they're going to get a lot of ground ball and that sort of stuff. So I think there's a bit to play out there, but based on form, I mean, Leggy's probably the one that we look at as the most like-for-like in defence or Hoskin, and you can't drop guys on form at this time of year. But he's so stiff. He's so stiff, Johnny Noble, given he played, 80-plus games in a row since he got to the club. I don't know, Nico, but it's going to be fascinating this time in about a fortnight.
Yeah, like you said, matchups will come into it, but it's just unfortunate that he plays the position he does because we were going to have one extra there with Noble in it, and it turned out it was going to be him or Markov, and they went with Markov this time around. Whether that changes next week, like you said, or you bring Ginnivan into the side and out goes someone else, and you throw a Noble onto the sub or Markov onto the sub. But you still got Nick to come back in. So whether Maynard ends up copying any kind of suspension remains to be seen. That's potentially a way back in for Noble, but it seems either. We haven't touched on it at all yet, but it seems like he'll get 3 or he'll get nothing. So,
Well, let's get to it now because we'll save selection, of course, for the big preview pod next week. But yeah, it was a very bizarre one. We were at the ground and had to wait about 45 hours before it actually came onto the big screen to work out what had actually happened from Maynard, and then in come the boos and all that and all the drama and commentary that's surrounded it since the actual incident. So, yes, he's going to the tribunal. The case is tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow
Yep.
at 6 p.m, I think.
So, there's going to be a lot that still plays out. AFL have stepped in to take it to the tribunal. I don't mind it. I don't agree with the grade, but I don't mind it going to tribunal because this is not a simple case of, yep, here's 2, here's 3, here's none. Let's actually go through the process of going through all the options, hearing the witnesses, hearing the sides of both, and then working out what needs to happen from there. But I want to get your immediate reaction to the incident, and now that you've seen all the angles, you've heard all the commentary from just about every man and his dog, what do you think will actually happen to Braden Maynard?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting that Laura Kane has stepped in, and I can't remember it happening, Nico. It's usually been enough for Michael Christian to say what he needs to say. You got that?
Yeah, I did. Yes, thank you.
But
don't know what that was.
Yeah, g'day Siri. But look, I can't help but feel that given the unique nature of the incident and the fact that there's a new person in a senior position of the AFL office, combined with it being Braden Maynard, combined with it being like there's so many layers once again to this incident. We've seen captains, obviously not for an incident like this, but for head-high contact and the like, get off in recent times. And then you've got guys like Braden Maynard who present differently when they play. And I don't care what you say, there seems to be a level of discernment about how the player plays and then what seems to be the most appropriate course of action. I'm actually grateful that it is going to the tribunal because I think there's a really strong case here. But ultimately, what happened to Gus Brayshaw was horrific, but I just can't. I've tried to be as unbiased as I can before coming on this podcast today. I just can't see how he could have not collected him.
No.
And on those grounds, it just seems very counterintuitive to penalise a player for doing something that we all love, which is playing hard, fast, competitive footy. And no one does that more so than Bruzzy for Collingwood. So I'm sure there'll be some mixed reactions all throughout the week. And I feel like we'll be back at the tribunal probably on Wednesday or Thursday, maybe even Friday as well. But yeah, every person in Melbourne's got an opinion on this one at the moment, Lukey.
So what's yours, Luke?
No, I agree with everything you've just said. I reckon you've just summed it up perfectly. Like you said, at the ground, they didn't show the replay for a little while and the game had stopped and the stretcher was out and all the fights were going on. So, like for me, I hadn't really seen it live and then I'm just thinking, geez, who was that? Oh, it's Bruzzy. Bruzzy's on report. I'm like, crap. What's he done? And then I'm thinking the absolute worst when everything is going on. And then when they finally trying to get the phone with couldn't get any internet, so I couldn't see it at all. Finally seen it when they showed it on the screen. I thought, really? Like, it wasn't that. Like you said, I don't know what he could have done to avoid any contact. Unfortunately, he's collected Brayshaw head high. But for me, Braz has braced himself for contact and he's almost tried to, you can see his hands have come back a little to try and ease the contact, but he's running from the half back at full pelt and the angle he ends up jumping and running on, he's always going to hit Brayshaw. And potentially you go, well, maybe he shouldn't have gone in as hard, but it's finals footy.
You're telling me that he's not going to go in 100%?
Yeah, you let them kick a goal because you haven't gone in 100%. You get dragged because you have only put in an 80% effort and you were soft at that contest. And the funniest thing is that Bailey Fritsch copped it, I think, from Luke Hodge for that last contest where Quaynor took the intercept mark because Fritsch didn't make contact and didn't go hard enough. He was afraid of contact.
He doesn't like contact.
But if Fritsch goes in and takes Quaynor out, and knocks Quaynor out, then he's on the chopping block. So what are players supposed to do? They don't know. Best wishes to Gus.
Yeah, the consequence of it is horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Absolutely.
But I just like you said, I don't know how else you could have avoided that without just letting him kick the goal.
Do you think there'll be any more input from the AFL? So say it goes to tribunal tomorrow, he gets cleared. Do you think they're trying to make some sort of case, knowing the situations that have happened in the past this year where the head has been so, as they say, sacrosanct, and that they want to make a big example of dealing with concussions the way they have, and there are all these trials going on and everyone getting sued. So I don't know. I feel like this is going to last and drag a lot longer than it needs to. I don't think he'll get off originally. I believe that he will cop a suspension of some sort.
Appeal.
And the Collingwood will appeal straight away, and it might drag on to, as you say, this time next week. We still could be trying to work out if he's going to play or not, which could absolutely be the case.
And I think they will do that just for the media attention anyway.
There's a lot of money to be made this week.
Yeah.
The discussion has continued all the way since Thursday from every single broadcasting media channel. Like you said, everyone's had an opinion on it. People who I didn't even know watched AFL have had an opinion on it. It's just ridiculous. So it will, like you said, they'll want to make an example and look like they are doing the right thing for the players and protecting the head. I think it's a little bit of optics in there and just trying to make themselves look good. But yeah, they'll for the other benefit for them is that it drags out in the media and more people are talking about it and they keep the conversation going. So
I think to myself, there's been points made through various media channels about Maynard needing to. He's perhaps turned and motioned in air and has collected Brayshaw flush with the shoulder, and what was the alternative? And Paddy Dangerfield actually made an interesting comment during the call in terms of players having a duty of care to themselves to try and protect their own heads.
Foremost. Yeah,
that's right. And so I don't know what people are asking Maynard to have done in less than half a second, because the alternative is basically to keep your arms up in the air and just collide with Brayshaw, which could have still done similar amounts of damage and potentially knocked Bruzzy out as well. So I appreciate the amount of commentary and sincerity coming from lots of people, given Brayshaw's history with concussion, which I think is it won't be considered a factor, but it absolutely is in the narrative because he's got a helmet on, and how that all plays into the number of weeks that are given, Nico, is going to be fascinating. But the media will beat this to a pulp because it's a money spinner for sure.
I don't care what anyone says. It's a football act for mine. And if you're going to ask him not to go and smother the ball, then we need to have a real good look at what this game is turning into, in my opinion.
And how do we, I don't think we've ever seen a smother turn into a concussion in the game in recent.
Not that I can remember.
For as long as I can remember. So there's no real precedent for this case. But I guess the most similar one is when blokes accidentally take a knee to the head in a contest, if a player's running back with the flight of the ball. It's hard to find something that's a like for like.
I thought the most similar that I'd seen was the Tom Lynch
that's got some
marking
airtime
contest, which was still completely different, but he's gone and
he's not even looking at the pill.
And he's instinctively gone to protect himself while midair, and he's actually, to me, I thought was probably worthy of a suspension. I think he ended up getting off.
We did.
But to me, it's also fair enough. He's got to protect himself, and like you just said, with Maynard, he had to protect himself. And the thing is, we're all watching it with a million replays, slow motion, this angle, that angle.
Yeah.
If you've ever been out in the footy field, you don't have time to think about what you're doing.
Knocked him out before he'd even realised what had happened.
Yeah.
I know it sounds very callous, but it's not even split seconds; it's split milliseconds. In this instance,
such different to a bump where the consequences of those actions are solely on you, and that's absolutely fine. But when it's a football act like a smother, then a lot more common sense has to be taken into account. So hopefully that's what happens when they go to tribunal tomorrow night. But we'll leave it for now. I'm sure we'll be chatting a lot about it this time next week. Before we wrap up the analysis of this game, I want to discuss about what this does for our aspirations of going all the way and winning the Premiership, because we mentioned off the top that it was such an important fixture in the context of the final series, where it led us towards not only a home preliminary final, who those opponents were going to be, our path towards the grand final, what it does for our recovery, Nick Dacos coming back into the team, of course. But this feels like a win that's worth 5 or 6. It just seems like it's going to be such a telling factor into what we're striving to achieve, of course, that being another flag. But I'm so proud of the boys for how they performed throughout those 4 quarters. I couldn't be more impressed with the way they went about it, their mantra, their ability to keep the game in their control despite all the challenges coming their way. And it's a real telling moment about what this team can really do, hopefully, in a couple of weeks' time.
And I think it's just reward for the year that's been, probably the 18 months that's been. We finished 4th last year, lost that qualifying final to Geelong, but this year we finished 1st. We earned the right to the home final. We play against a Melbourne side, so it's not really a home ground advantage or anything like that. But we get the job done. Now we get the reward for finishing 1st. We get the week off, and we get to go on to the not easier side of things, but the more helpful side of the draw to us, because we're going to get an interstate side for the preliminary final, and that ends up being our reward for finishing 1st, a home preliminary final where no matter whether it's Port Adelaide or GWS, it's going to be a majority Collingwood crowd. And that's, I know grand final is going to be, hopefully we're there, and that's one of the great days of the year, but something about preliminary finals, it's probably the best footy experience of the year. So I'm really looking forward to that, no matter who we play. But yeah, credit to the boys. Like you said, Nico, they put the work in, and this is the reward for finishing 1st.
And just to reflect, and Fly said in his presser, Nico, that we want to live in this moment and really soak this in, because I thought about the exact same point, Lukey, about how our finals experience for this campaign is already a progression on last year. And even though last year was all these amazing wins by narrow margins, we finished with a bit of better win-loss record. We're not just getting over the line; we're actually the best in the comp. And so to have that from one season to the next, and having finished 17th in 2021, it's an incredible time to be a Collingwood supporter. So let's just hope that with the Ferrari waiting in the engine, Nick Takos, and some others to be in the mix, that we really will go in with almost as strong as team as possible, Nico.
Yeah, that's absolutely looking like the case, which we're really excited to see how it pans out. Let's get to our votes from Thursday night. Marcus, who are your 3-2-1s this week?
Thanks, Nick. I'll go with 1 vote to Isaac Quaynor for his game-saving acts late in the match. 2 votes to Bobby Hill. He was electric all game, very stiff to not get best on. But because, for me, Melbourne's contest was very, very good in the second half, and Petrarca and Oliver kept on coming, and Jack Crisp, for mine, was the one that really stood up and made sure that we wrestled back some level of control throughout that game. So kept his feet in a wet match as well, which means everything. 3 votes to Jack Crisp. Your vote's Lukey.
1 vote, Tom Mitchell. I thought he had a really important in and under tough game. A lot of on the knees kind of stuff, handballs out of congestion. I thought he's not we didn't rack up a high amount of disposals. Crispy only finished with a 23, and he was our leader, Tom Mitchell 21. So I thought just throughout the game there were so many instances where the ball was trapped in there, and Titch was able to just squeeze a little handball out and get us out of a bit of a jam. So I thought he had a really important game and showed why we did recruit him at the start of the year. My 2 votes, Bobby Hill, for his 3 goals, one of our most electrifying out in the field, and he deserved those 3 goals. And my 3 votes, Will Hoskin-Elliott, as he was my pilot called mine. Thought majority of the game I said he's been our best on, and I think he played a 4-quarter performance, so he's got my 3.
Steele's going to be very stiff not to feature in any of the votes.
There's a few stiff this
Absolutely.
week for sure.
Quaynor and more as well in my ones. I gave 1 to Crispy. I agree with a lot of the points you just mentioned there, Marcus, about his work in the contest and his ability to, a lot of contested possessions as well, and continues to move that ball forward. I thought was critical. Bobby Hill's 3 goals gets him 2 votes. Built for the big stage. We'd love to see it. Let's hope he can continue to bring that energy into our upcoming finals. Well, Hoskin-Elliott gets 3. That's probably one of the best games I've seen him play for quite a long time, and has just solidified his position in his team, particularly, I think, even in the near future. I'm not just talking about the rest of the year. Just proves that he still might have a bit of a role to play for us in the coming year or two, which is great to see as well. A lot of stiff ones, but that's a great sign for a side heading towards a home preliminary final. Let's take a quick break. Actually, first, I'll go through some of the fan votes. I know I've been behind on them, but I'll get to them. Don't worry, updates are coming soon. Bobby Hill was the standout for our fans. He got top votes across the board, over 300 responses as well, which is great to see our fans getting involved. Will Hoskin Elliott right up there too, alongside Steele's side bottom, continuing to get lots as well. Isaac Quainer and Mason Cox got quite a bit of love as well towards the end, rounding out the top 5 or 6 too. So we'll get some updates for you on those votes shortly. But spoiler alert, Nick Dacos still does lead, so can't help you out too much more with that. But we'll take a quick break. We've got Guess the Crowd and a bit of an AFLW wrap to finish off. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold. Let's get right into Ask Pies Nation, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, TikTok, everywhere, absolutely everywhere we are right now, just like the pies are. So great to see, and keep getting involved as well on all our social media pages. So we'll jump right into it. Lukey, what was the question of the day?
Surrounded what kind of pleased you about the win, and then sort of any concerns across the next week that need to be addressed going into a preliminary final. So start with Carnival King 23. Our back six were absolutely elite, and it was fantastic to see some of our quieter players put in big efforts with bodies on the line. For example, Will Hoskin Elliott. The only thing I could say is being able to stem the bleeding in the midfield and nullifying the likes of Petrarca or Oliver when they've picked up momentum. If we can manage to take the sting out of those sorts of sequences when momentum isn't with us, then we'll go a long way. Great win, boys.
Yeah, I think the most impressive part, or one of the most impressive parts of the win, was that defensive traits of ours coming back. There was always a lot of concern, even with the Essendon game, that we were going to struggle in that area of the ground again coming into the Melbourne clash, but it was awesome to see the likes of Moore and Murph and Quain are all standing up and having a really strong defensive effort as a unit.
Yep. Nick Terranova, our defence was immense, went again and again and again. Loved our connection between our mids and forwards. A few times we got out the back of them. Things to work on. Jamie needs to get his goal kicking straight. Thought McStay came back quite well in the second half after a poor first half.
Yeah, he looked all right early, Jamie Elliott, and just couldn't get some of those shots, and since then his confidence sort of waned.
It was weird. 0 goals, 2 in the first quarter, and just never liked
I knew once he missed the first one, he's very much a confidence player, and it will run with him for the rest of the night. So once he missed that first one, great. And just every time, no matter whether it was a set shot, it was just a fumble on the ground. He just couldn't get anything going his way, and I was calling almost for him to go off as the sub, because it's like he's really struggling out there, and he just never could get anything his way. So hopefully he can turn that around in the prelim. Jake Robinson, defence was superb. Will Hoskin Elliott proved the doubters wrong. Concerns, don't concede 67 inside 50s.
Yeah, in hindsight, yes, that probably doesn't help, because I think the difference was it 30,
67 to 39
or something like that in the end. Yes, so it wasn't ideal, but at the same time, it never really felt like, until they got to that 7-point margin, that they were looking that threatening. They were just bombing that ball in and hoping like hell that someone could take a mark. It was like we used to do back in the day, but it didn't feel like they were too threatening going inside 50 until it got to that margin.
Big Noosa official, we just didn't give up all game. We kept grinding, doing the 1%ers, Smothers, Shepherds. Those little efforts won us the game. Can't wait to get Dacos back in 2 weeks and demolish Port or GWS to book a grand final berth. Go Pies, it's coming home.
Oh,
demolish.
Yeah, very nice. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Mitchell McKay, our hardness at the ball, our gang tackling, Bobby Hill's work rate, and our ability to strangle the D's forward line in the last quarter, especially with Elliott and Myercheck both taking marks in our defensive 50.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Big mark by Elliott.
Pretty deep in our defensive 50. Myercheck too, I thought, had some good moments throughout the match as well, and was able to contribute in little bits and pieces.
Yep.
Degan Lotto, how well the defence stood up was the most pleasing aspect. Where does Nick Dacos play is the big question. Backline, midfield, or forward?
Yeah, good question. Might depend on our opponent again.
Yeah, I think potentially off a half back to begin the match, and then see how he goes working into the midfield.
Bowie's in space, need to work on getting hands on the ball a little more. Our defence was amazing, but our midfield needs to give them more of a chop out. That being said, everyone pulled their weight, and there weren't any bad players. Think Lipinski could be on the way out for Nakos.
Yeah, well, if there's going to be
Bit
one
of fear
person,
there for Paddy, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately for him, Marty Callahan, almost your name, Marcus Callahan.
The sub.
The back six was superb all night. Things to think about in 2 weeks. Keeping up Dan McStay's confidence. He kept presenting without much luck in the first half and then earned his results in the third quarter. Such a valuable component in this side.
I think he's starting to love the role that he's got in his side. I remember speaking about him at the start of the year about being the number one player inside that forward 50. He's taken that mantle pretty well, I think, over the last month or so, especially when Mychek probably hasn't been able to have the influence he would have liked that we saw in the mid-season. It's been great to see McStay really improve and take on that role really well.
And he didn't have the biggest game ever, but the moments that came to him, he took, and those.
How about that tap to Bobby Hill?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
enormous.
that second big mark he took inside 50 and the goal, like that few minutes where he got a few things his way, but that mark was huge. And at a time, same as the De Goey goal, that we just needed to hit back straight away, and he was able to provide that. So, Ashley Kate, I was a little worried about our midfield in the second half, but I thought our defence held up well, which is something we'd been missing in the latter half of the home and away season. Belinda Ward-Smith, our dedication and commitment. James Legasic. We took our chances early to get enough of a lead. Really impressed with the lads' ability to grind it out. Moore, Murphy and Quainer were elite with their intercepts. Two things we need to work on is our goal kicking and our ability to clear the ball out of defence when our opponent has locked it in. Overall, absolutely wrapped with how we have performed, and the lid is well and truly off.
Righto.
Hashtag
Okay.
flag
What
guys.
what do you think the solution then would be to his second point there about just getting that ball out of defensive 50? Again, don't think they looked too threatening going inside 50, but there are teams that if you give them enough chances, they will be able to capitalise. And it looked that way a little bit for the Demons, but is it just more about controlling possession, maybe forcing stoppages? I'm not too sure.
I'm not too sure.
I thought we did a pretty good job of being able to stop the momentum or halt it to an extent, but it got to a point where it was just we had to just absorb as much as possible, and there was just no we'll probably a bit out of our legs out on our legs as well in the last 10 or 15. So but I thought there were multiple stages where they could have easily kept the goals piling on and we were able to just absorb and hold on to the footy at stages, but you can't get the whole game on your own terms. So, Detroit Landers, the fact we are through to the prelims, my faith is with you. Get to and win the GF. Nadine Sharples, there was a real sense of determination and unity between the team. Will Hoskin stepped up and put the critics to rest. Loved his effort, loved the backline, and Darcy Moore's leadership was elite.
Yeah, all great points there. Just goes to show how important they all can be to a win like that. And it was every single player on that field that had a role to play, which is great.
And that is it.
That is it.
AskPiesNation.
Nice edition of Ask Pies Nation. So make sure you get involved on all our social media pages: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, Apple Podcasts,
Threads.
everywhere. Threads? No,
No.
you still haven't got Threads yet.
No.
I think that was a
think
very quick death,
think
that
it's
one.
Dead.
Threads, that's for sure. Well, let's move on to, I guess, the crowd and guess the margin competitions. 7 points was the final margin that we had against the D's. Quite a few names by the looks of it, Lukey.
Yep, so these tip the Pies by 7. Henza Symes, Brooke Newcomb, Stefan Villadu, Thomas Cornwell 06, Jack Hartley 11, Jesse Thompson 04, Akash Sandhu 19, Aaron D. He's got about 20 numbers there, so what a time to be alive. That's actually their name.
Yes, what a time it is. to be alive.
Well, that it is pretty good, isn't it? Terry Australis, 7-point margin. Mick Elquando, 7 points. And yeah, that
Jeez,
is
that's
it. So
quite a bit.
Shout out to
That's the
everyone.
most we've had, maybe, with a margin.
Well, everyone's. It's close margin, but not too close that it's. Well, it was pretty heart-stopping at the end, but it's at least over a goal. So, yeah, no, shout out to all those, and hopefully we have 2 more weeks worth of margins shout-outs to come.
And 92,000 people, or just over, at the end, at the MCG. And speaking of 7, that's how many people this Guess the Crowd competition winner was away from guessing it on the nose, which is an awesome effort. This one coming from, who's it? Mark Vella. Great effort from him to get 7 people off the crowd. So let's give him a call and let's chat more about why it's so good to win with a qualifying final victory.
Hello, Mark speaking.
Hello, Mark. It's Nicholas from the Pies Nation podcast here, mate. How are things?
Good, thanks. How are you?
All is good here, especially after Thursday night with that big qualifying final victory. Thanks for coming on and being our Guess the Crowd competition winner for this week. Were you just as pumped as we were after seeing us beat the D's by 7 points last Thursday night? Were you at the game?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was there. I'm an AFL member, so I was on level 3. I had really good seats, actually. And yeah, really pumped. And as I said to a lot of people before the game, I think that, as a lot of people said, the team that won our QF, our qualifying final, I think will win the flag. And I'm hoping that rings true now.
Beautiful, Mark. Thanks for joining us here, mate. Just want to get your emotions when that final siren went. It was probably one of the louder Collingwood cheers I've ever heard in my time going to the footy for the better part of over 30 years. But how are you feeling? Were you pumped? Did you get out afterwards? Run us through it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty nerve-wracking that last quarter, to be honest. We just couldn't get our hands on the footy, which was a real concern, especially in the middle. But at the same time, it just didn't really feel like we were ever going to lose that game. I think we seemed to have it under control. The defense was just amazing. But yeah, in terms of emotions, just obviously relieved to get through. And I think we're in the softer side of the draw now. So hopefully we can find our way through to the granny. So.
G'day, Mark. It's Luke. Congratulations on your Guess the Crowd competition win. We ask all our winners, how did you come to your crowd prediction? Was there a bit of science or maths behind it, or pure guesswork? How did you get so close?
Probably a little bit of both. I guess first thing I do is I think of, everyone was sort of talking about 95, and I thought I sort of just scaled it back a little bit from there, given the weather and stuff and no shows.
Very good.
So and sort of got me to 92, and then from there, just a couple of random numbers, the three random numbers on the end of that to try and come up with something that was close.
It was a pretty good effort to get 7 people off the crowd. Not too bad at all, Mark. Tell us about your journey to being a Pies fan. We always love hearing what our fans bring in terms of their journeys, and I'm sure yours is just as unique as well. So how did you become a Collingwood fan, and what have been some of the great moments over that journey?
Yeah, mine's a little bit different, I guess. I come from a European background, so my parents were sort of never into the footy at all when they came to Australia. But obviously then I was born here and sort of started to grow up in the culture. And I had an older cousin who sort of got in my ear pretty early on when I was about 5 or 6 and said, barrack for the Pies. And from there sort of followed them closely. And then started going to games sort of in my teen years, my early teens. And I've got a 5-year-old son now, Alex, who's footy obsessed and is already a mad Collingwood supporter. So I'm quite proud of that.
And whose number has he got on the back of his Guernsey there, Mark?
It doesn't have a number at the moment, but he loves Guinea. As
I was going to say, is it
course.
33?
Yeah. He went to the footy for the first time last year, and that was when Guinea sort of started to hit the scene. And obviously took to the blonde hair and everything. So that's definitely his favourite. So.
No, that's awesome, Mark. Do you have a favourite moment or a favourite game, sort of maybe one that's a bit different as well, not just the same old finals wins or grand final?
Yeah,
Mate,
sure.
Is there something, a little bit of a different game that sticks out to you as a fond memory?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I was thinking about this one because I thought this question would come. I guess the first one will probably show my age a little here, as I'm a little bit older than you boys, but I was at the original Anzac Day drawn match in 1995.
Wow.
Sav.
And most of my friends growing up, most of my mates were Bombers fans. So yeah, it was a huge day.
Sorry to hear that, Mark.
Oh, that's gold.
Yeah, that was just an amazing atmosphere. I remember struggling to get into the ground because it was so busy. But yeah, it was an amazing day. And I guess another one that springs to mind, which is probably, I think, one of the best home and away games I've experienced, is 2002 round 8 against the Lions. I think it was at Etihad back then. We won by 3 points. It was a big shootout, and it was obviously then became a grand final preview for that year as well.
Yeah, a lot of people say that was the game that sort of sparked Collingwood's run in those early 2000s, which was great to see.
Similar vibe to this season. Do you think it could be a Pies Lions grand final, Mark?
I think it looks that way at the moment. I still think Melbourne's probably our biggest danger, but it's whether they can get through Carlton and then the Lions in Brisbane, I guess, is probably the question there. But yeah, Brisbane's been impressive, but I have confidence that we can beat them, given that we're a lot stronger defensively And I think at the MCG as well will be a different story.
Now, just before we let you go, Mark, you mentioned the qualifying final about the winner of that game being the ones that would probably go on to win the flag. So in your mind, is the lid off?
It's definitely open at the moment. It's not completely off. I guess, there's all the stuff with Buzzy at the moment as well is a bit concerning. But no, I'm pretty confident at the moment. I think, we got through, I think what would be the hardest game is Melbourne. So, fingers crossed we can get there and do the job against whoever it is that we end up facing.
Yeah, let's certainly hope we can get to that last day. Mark, thank you so much for joining us and being part of the Pies Nation podcast. And let's hope the wins keep coming over the next couple of weeks.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Love the pod. Keep up the great work. Go
Thanks,
Pies.
Mark.
Good on you, Mark. Cheers.
See you all.
There we go. That was Mark joining us as part of the Guess the Crowd competition. That could be you if you guess closest to the crowd. So keep an eye out for Luke's game day posts in the lead up to each match. Have a stab at the crowd, and if you are closest to the pin, that will be you joining us as part of the Pies Nation podcast.
Well done from Mark. Straight to the point, Lukey, and
That's what we like.
and just needs a 33 on the back of that.
It's good when
Jumper.
they're regular listeners who know the questions that are coming.
It's funny, isn't
they're
it? It's
prepared and ready with. Maybe we need to spark a few new questions to throw some people off.
He made a note about Jack Ginnivan. Can I ask, the Raw, when he came onto the field on Thursday night, you say it was some of the loudest crowd noise you've ever heard in a general game, but
Unbelievable.
it was deafening.
So it's hard to compare with this when Sam Kerr came on for the Matildas because I wasn't at the ground, but it felt loud on the TV. I kept saying, this is got to be louder than that. This was so
Insane.
loud. And this was almost louder than when the game ended and we'd won the game. It was just, and when we kept looking over like, is he coming? And then when he stood up, the cheers came. And then when he finally ran onto the ground, it was just unbelievable.
I'm so happy you brought this up because we talk about selection for the prelim and do you play Ginnivan because we assume we'll be on the fringes. That is a 25th man or whatever they call it when you've got that energy coming onto the ground, and he was straight into it as well. I know that there was a contentious call at the end there, and it all kind of, but it makes the game better when he's on the ground, I think is what I'm trying to say. And in a big match like that's a weapon.
And do you think it was a actual strategy that Fly used and held and waited? All right, we're going to wait to unleash Skinny at the right
when did
moment.
he come? Was it 5-10 minutes into the last?
Yeah, about
maybe?
10 to go.
And
I
it was like, it felt like they were just waiting for the moment where it was like, crap, they're coming here.
It's a momentum
we need to
shifter.
halt this.
Yeah.
I was feeling that early through the third quarter. I'm like, I wonder if Fly, hopefully no injuries come, but does strategy get involved in the energy lift that when Ginnivan comes on, that we can halt their run? And it did work because that's when they were coming, and then Ginnivan came on, and then the crowd got involved.
Brought something.
So he is the perfect sub for that reason. Unfortunately, it might be why he ends up staying there.
And I mean, that happened, and that wasn't planned or anything.
No.
So can you imagine what's going to happen in the prelim? And God knows what there are. Like it's huge for swinging the momentum.
Insane.
So
Great to see that reaction come across as well. So let's hope you can get a bit more involved next week. AFLW, we got on the board finally with that win over Fremantle, 21 points at our spiritual home at Victoria Park. After what was a pretty disappointing second half against the Demons, it was great to respond in that fashion. We were 37 points up at three-quarter time and kept scoreless in the last term, but the work had been done in the first three terms. It was terrific to see a lot of players get involved as usual, and nice to get off the board with the first win in the AFLW season.
Yeah, and a nice reward for a few first-timers for Collingwood, but also Bree and Brit Davey and Britt Benici had lengthy time off the field with their knee injuries, and nice for them to come back and enjoy a win together and with a lot of the newer girls as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to seeing if we can continue that going on. We've got the Gold Coast also at Victoria Park this week, so it'd be nice to see them. Of course, no Collingwood men's to look at, so it might be a good opportunity to head down to Victoria Park.
When's that game scheduled for?
Oh, great question. I just had it in my notes. Let me grab that for you while you keep going.
Sorry to throw you on to this spot,
There's always one instance where that happens.
Actually would be keen to get down there. So
Well, because I know that they've been playing some of the VFL games. The prelims are both on Saturdays.
Vic
which
Park Sunday,
Sunday.
3:05
There you go.
PM.
Perfect. There you go. So, yep. Great opportunity to head down. Great weather as well this weekend, I must add. It's going to be really nice, mid-20s as well. Got big plans coming up now with no prelim to look forward to. We'll have to wait till next week.
I'll just be watching Brisbane. No, sorry, not Brisbane. GWS Port, the close eye, Nico.
Yeah.
I think they're two really good games coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the Melbourne Carlton game has huge ramifications.
It's only going to be good if it's one way.
I
There's
feel like
only
Carlton.
one reason that'll be good.
Carlton, obviously, they'd want to go all the way, but I feel like they dropped this. They've had a really good fight back. They've ended up winning a final, so they probably launch into next year with some real momentum. Whereas Melbourne, if they drop this, then it's another failure of a year.
A few things they're going to have to look at.
Another almost a lost premiership. They got that one in 21, but they haven't been able to win a final in Melbourne for their fans since. So, and that's still the case. So I think there are huge ramifications for Melbourne if they drop this, and for them to still be, talking about the Maynard situation on a Monday when they've got a big final coming up Friday. I think they need to get their heads switched on. And but the other game, obviously, for our point of view, is going to be huge to watch, and really excited for it.
Tips for that game? I expect Port to bounce back, let's be honest.
Oh, look, I think GWS are on a tear at the moment. I don't think they give a stuff who they play or where. They've won 11
at 11 grounds this year.
Yeah, true.
And they lost to West Coast in Perth, so it should be 12. Unbelievable, that stat. That is the stat, and the reason they're not at 12 is because they lost
to
West
Coast.
The West
That is
Coast
very
in
true.
Optus, so.
You're right. I'd be more nervous playing GWS next week than Port. Absolutely at the G, considering as you said, the form that they're in right now. So I still think Port in Adelaide Saturday night. I think exactly what they'll need to bounce back. That can be their grand final.
They would want to bounce back big time.
Whatever the result is, I think it'll be under a goal.
Absolutely.
And what about the other game? Any tips?
Don't care one bit, to be honest. I'll just find out who wins on the Saturday morning.
It's a loss for everyone.
The funniest thing is, I'm probably going for Carlton now because Melbourne fans really annoyed me the last few days. So
can't do it.
But it's probably a good result either way.
Yeah, I guess
that was I don't know if you've watched that game, the Carlton-Sydney game, but that last 10 minutes was so enthralling.
Has your brother held up okay, knowing he's a Sydney fan?
I think he's pretty proud of the effort they put in to get back into that game and almost pinch it. I thought they bloody blew a lot of good chances, though.
Big time.
Carlton were letting them in, and they just couldn't get close enough. But, I think he's pretty proud of the effort, so he moves on to next year now.
Well, that's all we're going to have time for. Stay tuned next week. A huge preliminary final episode for you, previewing the big match we have against either the Giants or the Power. Be sure to keep up with all our social media pages as well at PiesNation. But until then, Marcus and Luke, thanks for joining me.
Thank you,
Nico,
gentlemen.
Thanks, Marcus.
I've been your host, Nicholas Sacco. You've been listening or watching to the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold.